Welcome to the third video on using the first two networks' PDSA template to document PDSA cycles. We return to our ongoing worked example of embedded student feedback in college STEM courses. This portion of the first two PDSA template refers to the study section. In our last video, we reviewed the do section, where you and your improvement team enact the change idea according to your plan. Here in the study section, we record some key documentation around how you and your team engaged with the data, whether or not your predictions were met, and what your key learnings were. Over here on the left, as usual, we have the column where you and your improvement team will fill in different information about your process. And over here on the right, we have information on what goes in each row. In this first section of the study phase, we refer back to the data collection logistics section of the planning template and the what happened when collecting data section of the do template. Here we ask you to focus on observations that you and your team made about your data. Observations are low inference statements about the data. So for example, again, continuing with the numbering scheme of aligning our data work to our predictions, with respect to our first prediction, which was with recruiting students to participate in the embedded student feedback process, the improvement team here noticed that all of the students who applied to be an embedded student were accepted. They also observed that most students, 7 of the 8 who completed the term, were sophomores. Again, I want to remind you that while this is based on a real PDSA cycle, that I have slightly adapted it from the actual one to make it a bit more instructive. So if you go and find the real one, the information here might differ slightly. You and your improvement team could then continue to document other examples of what you observed in the data. Please note that what makes these observations rather than interpretations is that they are very close to the data. Everyone in the team should be able to agree that all of the students who applied to be an embedded student were accepted. That's probably not something that team members would disagree with. That's either true or it's not. Similarly, most students, 7 of 8, were sophomores. Again, very close to the data, and it's probably either going to be true or not. In the second section, which I will scroll to now, we encourage you and your team to document how you interpreted data. Interpretations extend the thinking of the group beyond what the data immediately indicate, while also providing a clear rationale. Here, we notice that the improvement team interpreted that at least 5 students participated as embedded students in each class. This was because, even though there were 8 students overall, 3 students participated in both classes. So as a team, they agreed they had sufficient engagement from students for this to be a worthwhile test of the embedded student feedback change idea. Recall that prediction number 1 is that a total of 10 or more students were hopefully going to be recruited for the 2 classes in total. With only 8 students, this team wanted to discuss whether or not those 8 provided sufficient evidence. They thought they did, and their rationale was that with 3 students participating in both classes, they still had at least 5 students participating in each class, which had perhaps been their original goal, but not quite as phrased in their prediction. That's fine. This is an interpretation the team is making. A second interpretation is we may need new ways to recruit freshmen to be embedded students since most students who applied were sophomores. Recall in the prior row, there was documentation that 7 of the 8 students who participated were sophomores. So an interpretation the team made from those data is that that team may need new ways to recruit freshmen. That's not immediately evident in the data, but it's one step removed from the data as the team makes sense of it. In this third section of the template, this is where you and your improvement team reflect on each prediction that you made back in the planning phase, and then comment on whether it came true, in full or in part. As you and your team work on this section, it is important that you be completely honest and truthful amongst yourselves. Predictions are not fundamentally about being right or wrong. Predictions are learning opportunities first and foremost. Not meeting your predictions in whole is completely acceptable. The goal is for you and your team to learn from this process. Here in this section, I copy and pasted from the planning section each of the 4 predictions. You can see 3 of them on the screen now. The first prediction was that at least 5 students will apply for positions as embedded students in each course. This team assessed that prediction 1 was met in part. They expected 10 students to apply in total for 2 courses, and 9 students ended up applying. So 9 being less than 10, the prediction was met in part. Almost all the way there, but not entirely. Again, this is completely fine. And what we saw in row 2 is that the team felt that they still had enough data for this to be a successful PDSA cycle. Let's look at prediction number 2. Students will complete at least 80% of the weekly reports. The team assesses this as being almost met. Back in the do phase, they documented that the average number of reports for students was 11.5. The prediction at 80% would have been 12. So the prediction was almost met, and here the improvement team said almost met. Again, completely fine that it was not met in whole. Scrolling down to the final section of the study phase in this template is an invitation to describe the key learnings your team has from this test. So here, in whatever format you and your team wish, you can document the main themes and the key learnings that you have. Here, the team documented some highlights. Students appreciated their engagement in the project as it allowed them to function as the student voice for the class. Students also learned from journaling about their learning experiences and used metacognition to inform their learning and studying for the upcoming week. Instructors also appreciated receiving the reports. The reports helped them, the instructors, to stay informed on topics of confusion, communication issues, and allowed them, the faculty, to make small changes to improve student learning each week. Okay, thank you very much for watching this third video on using the first 2 networks PDSA template. In our final video, we will touch on how to use the template for the ACT phase.